Welcome to the Igniting Change podcast. My name is Duncan Cook, founder of Three-Sided Cube, trusted technology partner for some world-changing organizations. We know the power that technology has to have a positive impact on people's lives. But on this podcast, myself and my co-hosts Puff and Sophie are out to meet the people behind the technology, hear their stories and understand what drives them, and hopefully inspire others to join the mission and do some good in the world.
Wow, thank you so much. Finally, we get you on Igniting Change. It's been a journey to try and get this session to happen, but we're making it happen, and I'm so excited to have you on the show, Sarah. Did you want to intro yourself? So tell us who you are, what organization you're with, and I mean, please do tell me how you got to where you got to, Sarah.
It's a long story, but I'll keep it brief. And so I'm Sarah Evans, and I'm the founder of an international organization called Well Aware. It is a 501c3 in the U.S., so we're not nonprofit. We started our first project work in 2010, so it's coming up on 15 years that I've been doing this work. I was in my early 30s when I started the work, so it was not something that I had trained to do, nor anything that I thought that I ever would do, because I went to law school and I practiced for a little while doing securities law and then lobbying work. And then a project in East Africa sort of fell in my lap, and one thing led to another, and now we are here today. So I don't want to go on and on, but I can explain any part of that.
Well, that's quite a big transition, going from being a lawyer to then doing this. How did this opportunity fall into your lap, Sarah? How does that happen?
Yeah, well, okay. Well, I met a friend. Okay, I met a friend on an airplane because our boyfriends were friends at the time. And her father is from Kenya, and she was telling me about how she had just returned from this trip to visit that part of her family for the first time, and was devastated to see how this whole other part of her family was having to live, because they were Maasai. And it's one of the predominant tribes in East Africa. And they're pastoralists, which means their livelihood is their livestock. So these cattle and goats. And so, if she and I got to know each other a little bit better, the boyfriends disappeared, but she and I have remained friends. And she just said, I really feel like I need to do something. Would you help me? She says to me, would you help me write up the paperwork so we can raise some money and replace some of these goats and cattle that are dying, in my family's village, so that, we can, help them out a little bit. And I said, absolutely. Yes. I want to be a part of this. And so I started looking into it and kind of researching how we would raise money and what how we would address the problem in a responsible way. And what I learned quickly was that the reason that the livestock weren't surviving is because of the water problem. And it wasn't just the livestock, addressing just the livestock, replacing them wasn't gonna be a long-term solution. And so I said, hey, what we should do? We should drill a water well for this community. And then that's going to support the livestock long-term. And also, look, we can get all these disease rates down, we can keep kids in school longer. I was learning about the incredible impact of not having water has on a community, as well as how things can change. And once you put water somewhere like that, and I think it was the experience of learning all of this, because I fancied myself a really intelligent, worldly person, right? And I was so humbled to understand all these different nuances and facets of this singular problem. And it just got me really, really excited, because I thought, and if I'm being honest, Puff, while I was doing pretty well professionally, my heart and my soul were not, and I kept thinking that I should feel great with a good income and all these other things around me, but I just didn't. And once I landed on this project and I started sinking my teeth into how we could really address this very critical problem, and I thought I came up with a solution, it just lit me up like I was who I was supposed to be for the first time.
And I think that's so important, because if you're not, it really shows. I just don't think the work that you, and it might have been different for you, Sarah, but like the you have to really, excuse my language, Ollie, our producer's going to kill me, but you have to give a shit about what you work on. You have to care. You have to be passionate, because if you're not, it can feel really mundane and really like you don't really want to go the extra mile to make a difference. And I think that's super important. So tell me, did you install that well? Did you go there? Did you see, like, talk to me about that initial community?
Yeah. So this is kind of it's a fun story. Gosh, we were just so scrappy in the beginning. And once I convinced my friend and our little group of friends that we were going to do this, we were going to raise money to drill a well on the other side of the world. For some reason, everyone was like, yeah, let's do it. Right. Nobody said, That's right. I can be very convincing, I think. But we didn't know how to fundraise, but I was looking at this like very early concept at the time, peer-to-peer fundraising. And so because we live in Austin, Texas, and Austin is known for being quirky, and because I've never been a fan of showering too often, somebody in the group, and I'm sure we're sitting on my floor, like, probably having a beverage or two, trying to figure out how we're going to raise the money for this well. And somebody said, you know what, we should all just go on shower strike because Sarah doesn't shower anyway. We all had a belly laugh. And then we were kind of like, wait, no, that could work here. And so then I just sat around and like coded buttons in PayPal, like we used to do back in the day, and set up this sort of like, website. And we started telling all of our friends we weren't going to shower again until we raised $25,000. And in 1 week, we had raised $25,000.
Oh my gosh. What?
Yes. Yeah, I know. So we thought, okay, well, we're on to something for fundraising, but we had raised enough for that first well. A couple months later, we hopped on a plane and we flew to Kenya and we drilled. Now, I was doing a lot of research on the back end and lining things up, behind the scenes as well. And when we got there, so I'd been to other places in Africa, but I'd never been to Kenya. So we got there and somebody picked us up from the airport and we stayed in this really awful place overnight. Next day we were on the drill site and they were drilling, and it was an amazing experience being on the drill site with all of those people, especially the women and the children were just phenomenal. And it takes a couple of days, when you're drilling a deep borehole. And we hit water for the first time, and there was a little girl on the drill site, and she had befriended me, and she like hopped into my arms, and I gave her a bottle of water from the water that just started coming out of the ground that I'd never seen before, and I held her and she drank it, and it was that was just the moment that my life just went, okay, we're going that way, and so after it was all said and done, it was a really incredible water system for a really large community. And I was really, really excited and proud about that. But I learned on that same trip that most of the projects that are done for communities in these developing regions, especially in rural regions, they don't work after any period of time. The industry average is that only about 40% of water infrastructure put in developing regions lasts beyond a year. Right.
What?
Yes, I know, right? I keep forgetting that not everybody knows that now. Yeah, but yes, it's a big problem that most people who are just, contributing to these causes don't fully understand. And so I really, really wanted to do this work. I really wanted to apply the skill set that I had, like I'm pretty good at this legal thing. I'm organized. I can convince people to do things. I was actually a civil engineering major in undergrad before I switched to public speaking. And I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure out why everything is failing. And we're going to keep building these projects, but we're going to do them in a way that they will last and truly serve the communities in the way that we promise each and every community. And so we've spent the last 14 years doing that. And we have a 100% success rate.
Oh,
I know.
My gosh, that is incredible. Like absolutely incredible compared to what saying 40% don't last longer than a year. I mean, that's truly shocking.
It is shocking. And it's okay. Let me say this too. Like, it is a lot of hard work. We put in so much investigation and document collection and community interviews together before we ever poke a hole in the ground. And that's a big part of it. And a lot of organizations just don't do that. for various reasons that I can unpack if you'd like. But, and then
give us a few of those reasons. Why don't they do that due diligence?
Oh, well, guys, it's complex, but the long story short, it's just that, okay, when we started doing all this work in these developing regions, most of it was out of some kind of colonialism, right? And so we kind of inherited a way of supporting these communities that is in sort of like a post-colonialism vein. And I don't mean to shame anybody by saying that and bringing light to that, because a lot of people within my sector, people doing similar work, understand this to be true. And a lot of people understand that, given all the connectivity that we have now, and we can we can serve these communities in a much better way, and like the technology and the talent coming out of universities in these regions, but nobody has decided that they're going to change what they've done. So most water charities implement almost exclusively just hand pump water systems. Not all of them, but most of the big ones, right? So if you see a water organization advertising that it's $5,000 for a water well, that's going to be a hand pump. So those are the ones that you have to crank, and it's pulling from a very high water table. And the problem with that is that water, that level of water, is usually contaminated with coliform from fecal matter that just soaks in or runs off. Water systems are all connected too, like water, everything under the ground is an ecosystem. And so that's important to understand doing this work too. So the hand pump thing, it's an easy price point for donors. And then you don't, it's easier to install. And by that, I mean, it's easy to know if there's water, let's say, 50 feet below the ground, right? Because, there's been enough activity and you can kind of see from signs on the surface of the ground. But when you're going deep into the ground to find those plentiful big aquifers, and that's ideal, right? Then it's already filtered throughout these several layers of sediment. So you're never going to see coliform beyond 75 meters beneath the ground. So, the water is safer, but it's a lot more complicated to do. And so what's happened, it's at least here in the US, is our donor base, our supporter base has been educated that a water well is $5,000, that it shouldn't be that complicated to set up. And that the success of that is the picture of the kid drinking out of it right after it's installed. And all of those things are just not true. I want to say, though, for hand pumps specifically, there is a time and a place where a hand pump is really all you can do. And so I don't want to trash that particular system type altogether, but it is vastly and widely overused. And you can you could take 5 hand pump systems, instead put those resources into a deep borehole, serve more people, and then not just address their drinking needs, because that's all you can get out of a hand pump, but also you can clean the medical clinic. You can have faucets at the school, you can do gardening, you can have sanitation and hygiene. That is a game changer for a community. And anything that's going to really change the future of a community, the community will invest in, and they will protect it with their lives. The hand pump water systems, on the other hand, you have to walk a long distance to get it. These women, and it's always women and children, sitting in these long lines, it opens them up to all kinds of abuse and harassment, and that happens on a regular basis. And then you're getting just enough water that you can literally carry home, right? And so, and that's that. Now, so kind of zoom out a bit on those two different types of water systems, because I'm getting pretty esoteric here. But you have one it's easy to sell, easy to fund and easy to walk away from. And then you have one that just takes a lot more thought and care. And so at the end of the day, while the price point of the systems are commensurate to the population that we're serving, like I said, these deep boreholes are going to last a lot longer. People are going to really continue to invest in them. And then we have to probably spend a little bit more money on all that recon, right? And the paperwork that we gather and the mileage reimbursements to make sure our team is checking on every little thing to ensure sustainability. And donors don't like to fund recon, and they don't like to fund maintenance, and they don't like to fund impact measurement assessments. But that's because we've told them that they're not supposed to. So.
And you know what? That is such a common a common challenge in terms of not just in terms of funding your work, Sarah,
Yeah.
but the work, like any software development,
Yeah.
just the way that funding works in this sector, it's not fit for purpose, I think, moving forwards. And
No.
I'm being really honest. And I
Yep.
could probably name one or two foundations that are starting to address this,
Yeah.
because if you're bringing, like, you've done it, you guys have brought an app to life, you need to think about hosting, you need to think about support, you need to think about continuous
Yes.
development. Like, if anyone's developing or like designing or developing a website or a platform or an app or whatever the technical solution is, there are going to be recurring costs. And
Yes.
like, going for a single pot of money without any consideration of those recurring costs,
Yes. 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 Yes.
it's super difficult and super hard. And
Yeah.
for the past however many years, probably 5 or 6 years, I've been so frustrated because there needs to be a piece of work done educating funders, educating foundations, that
Yes.
you can't just fix it with a one-off solution. Like, there are ongoing costs associated, and if you do not take that into consideration, you're setting yourself up for failure, essentially, or putting ridiculous amounts of pressure on funding teams to be able
Yes.
to try and secure funding from other pots of money that then
Yes.
have red tape and restrictions around
Yes.
that like go against what you've already signed off. So it's a bit of a mess, Sarah, if I'm being
Oh my
honest.
gosh, it is such a mess. Are you in the US, Puff, or are you down under?
I'm in the US. So right now I'm in Florida, but I travel around a lot, and we've got quite a few clients based on the East Coast.
Okay.
I know we're going a little bit off topic, but I will say I was at a Tech for Good conference last year, and interestingly, it was almost like a roundtable discussion around funding, and there was I'm nervous to name the names of the foundations, but it was really interesting hearing their take on why they, like, these particular foundations fund the way that they do. But it's archaic. Let's be honest. Like,
so
the world has moved on so much.
That's right. Yeah.
The way that things operate now just aren't how they operated 20 years ago. So, and I guess one of my frustrations with the for good sector, and I love it, I really love it, and I love the fact that we are so lucky enough to operate in this, is the speed and the pace in which people operate. Like, it can be really slow, and I don't, and you can get that anywhere. You can get it in the corporate world, right? But we can't carry on like this. Things are going to change.
Well, it's true, and more people are getting frustrated. And reason I was wondering if you're based in the U.S., because this isn't a problem specific to the U.S., but we are really leaning into this issue. It's definitely the worst here. And the thing is, too, like, once you're inside of a nonprofit, it is exceedingly difficult to speak up about it because we are terrified of losing donors. We're terrified of turning away board members. We're already in the middle of like a hiring crisis and a board member crisis and an economic crisis, And so it's almost like we're silenced in a way. And I would love to talk more about it, like on LinkedIn, and I've done a couple podcasts, and I want to do more, but what I can't do is ruffle any feathers on the funding side. So I think that what we haven't figured out yet to address this issue is how do we talk about it? How do we even talk about it?
And I don't know. Like, I don't have the answers, but I think I applaud anyone. I don't see anyone openly speaking about it, because you're right. People are nervous to upset donors and high value donors. But equally, I think there is this almost like a new generation of donors coming into the mix now that, they understand that, like,
They
that
do.
there are recurring costs. They're more, they're more clued up with just how things are operating now, and perhaps
Yeah.
they appreciate change and they
Mm.
appreciate honesty. I'm not saying like like more traditional donors don't, but it's that thing of, you know what,
Yeah.
there's a problem here and we
Yeah.
need to address it and we need to be able to speak openly about it.
Yeah.
And I think
They do.
more people do it, it will set a precedent for other people to be able to do it. But no one's like brave enough to basically
Yeah.
start a fire,
That's
essentially.
true. And like we're all making such a small amount of money. Like it's not like we have like a buffer to just like blow it up and then walk away. You know,
And
it's just a real catch-22.
so Sarah, your organization, where do you get funding from? Are you reliant on grants and donors? Like, talk to me about that. Is it still peer-to-peer fundraising?
Actually, yeah, we still do the shower strike every year because it's so effective. Yeah.
That's amazing. I genuinely hadn't heard of this, and I am up for doing this. So you've got to
Okay.
tell us the details, Sarah, of when the shower strike is.
Well, the timing is really interesting because the shower strike is coming up next month, April. I know,
Okay.
end of April, last week of April, and it's funny. So, Puff, I was born in Australia. I was born in a community in a Kalang outside of Bellingen, Coffs Harbour area. And I have my people from there. They do shower strike every year. So we got a shower strike down under. We got some folks in Switzerland. It's a big deal now. We went from raising 25,000 to last year was bad, but we've almost hit 500,000 in this one little campaign.
That's amazing.
I
That's
know.
awesome.
It's so fun. I will send y'all information. We would love to have you participate.
Absolutely, we can definitely do this, and we can link out, and we can share the details around that.
Amazing.
So, right, we digress. But tell
Yeah.
me,
Oh,
Sarah,
yeah.
like, talk to us about how your organization are using technology now to address
Mhm.
the problem.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, all of this ties together. I want to mention real quick though too, we don't only rely on the peer-to-peer fundraising now, but we do almost exclusively rely on public dollars.
Okay.
But I could foresee a few years ago that we were going to have to come up with another kind of recurring revenue to be able to weather storms like where we are today. I'm a little bit behind on that, but so a few years ago, a few different issues sort of popped up at the same time that I thought we could address together with one solution. So Wellaware was getting more and more projects under our belt. And while we do set communities up for success, they're still going to need us. We still need to pop in from time to time. But then, how though logistically were we going to be that available to each and every growing number of communities in the same way? And then two, technology is just like booming over there, right? Like you can sit in the middle of Masai Mara and be on social media, and that's like, well, we're already so connected. And then we have this issue for Wellaware needing to have contact with our communities. And then it's two, maybe we could do something about the sector, like if it's easier for people to maintain their water systems. And that was the thing. The follow-up is critical. You can't just put a big piece of infrastructure in the middle of nowhere and expect it to just run forever. That's just crazy. And so if we gave other NGOs, if we gave other nonprofits a tool to make all this easier and keep all the data in one place, then maybe we could play a role in shifting the sector and how we do our work. So I thought, and because I have went to law school and have a law degree, I still keep up with my education sometimes. So I'm sitting in a patent seminar, I don't know, several years ago. And I talked to the guy after. He said, you should go ahead and patent this idea. Because I thought about it like an app, right? And our expertise, our checklists and decision tree diagnostics and everything in a tool. And then we just put it in the hands of the people actually using the system, because that makes sense. And so it's been quite a labor of love. And when we started to really get almost to the finish line, COVID hit and everything sort of changed, and not just our timeline and our ability to progress, but also social impact investor sentiment really changed. So we've slowed down a bit, but I think we finally will have what we call our administrative portal. So the app itself is a tool in the hands of the community members. And I should say too that cell phones are ubiquitous in these places. More people have a cell phone than have access to a toilet on the continent of Africa. So they're everywhere. So the app is the tool that the community members use. And they can do regular maintenance. They can run diagnostics. And in our year now of experience, almost half of the issues can be solved just on the phone itself. We don't have to send people out there. And then we have a running dialogue on record with every community and a history of everything that's happened on every system. Huge. The sector needs this tool, right? So what the key part of the tool for NGOs is sort of where all this data kind of collects and visualizes itself. That's the piece we're finishing this year, so we can finally start to offer it to other nonprofits. But we've been using it.
And it sounds like it's working extremely well. If you can, triage all of those and get people to essentially help themselves and fix it themselves, it's reducing costs in terms of travel and getting people out there to try and resolve any situations. But it's giving you visibility of any common issues that come up, right? And it can provide. So the second piece, the data piece, and how that can be helpful to NGOs. Talk to me a little bit about what you're going to be offering there, or is it still all like coming to fruition, or do you have like a very nailed approach for that piece?
We do. And so what we did during 2020, when NGOs everywhere were kind of just stuck, we took what we built so far of the app and we turned it into a COVID training tool and chat support, and found resources in each region. And it was picked up by lots of NGOs because we offered it for free, And through that exercise, we got a lot of attention for the app, a lot of PR, and attention from other NGOs. So I have a huge pipeline already of people waiting to see the first iteration of this tool outside of WellAware. So that's my phase one, getting it in to the hands of these people. And the data, So where organizations are shy or reluctant to say that we need to invest in maintenance and say that we need to invest in impact measurement, it's going to be easier once people can spend less money on it and less time on it, and it's all there in one place. And so hopefully we can just migrate people to doing this work a better way by having this solution in their hands. So it will be licensed to NGOs, and we can be flexible. It doesn't matter. We just need to cover our costs, our ongoing costs to keep the software afloat. Like I've learned so much about how to build and maintain software. It's wild. I mean, you can't just build it and set it free.
It's so true. And Sarah, are there any particular lessons that you've learned? Like, obviously we've talked about one in terms of, look, you can't just put something out in the wild. There are going to be recurring costs and recurring things that you're going to need to do. But any other insights or learnings that you can share with our listeners today?
Oh, but so many. I don't know where to start.
Okay, 2 or 3.
Okay. I guess, we've been focused a lot on the work of nonprofits. So, people listening, if they're interested in being a part of an NGO or nonprofit work, or even like a social impact company, because I'm asked this question a lot, and I love the opportunity to get to talk to young people. Trust me. But I let everybody know that it's just learn a lot. Just learn as much as you can before you really invest a lot. And I did not do it the right way. When I decided to drop my life and pivot, I mean, I can't say that I regret anything, but I sold my home and I sold my car. Like, that's not sustainable, like that's, I'm lucky that I'm still here doing this after all of that. So can't give away too much of ourselves, getting this stuff started, especially if you're alone, or largely alone, because if you gotta be able to last for a while and keep up the energy. Other lessons learned. You know, I've just learned so much. I've learned how to be a better parent through my work, and I've learned how to be better at my job through my kid. As long as I'm listening.
Yep, there you go. That's a really, do you know what? That's really interesting. And I don't think we've had anyone talk about that. But
Yeah.
I agree with that. Like it helps me. Like it helps me listen and
Yeah.
understand things. And I think it ties back to ultimately when you're building or when you're designing and building a solution, you have to be able to listen and understand the needs and the requirements for who
Yes.
you're building and designing the solution for. And I do
Yes.
think it makes you step back as a
Yeah.
human and think about the people in your circles, family, friends, even work colleagues. I do
Yeah.
think it can make you a better human being.
Yeah, especially if you're in charge of it, because as a parent, you're in charge of this little human, and it's terrifying. And then, when you're running a company, you're in charge of that too. And so, especially like as your child kind of grows up and evolves, and because my daughter has grown up and evolved along the same timeline as the company itself. I was doing well with her before she was born, and that was a whole interesting situation. But I learned my patience, and real like commitment to waiting things out and picking my battles from her. And I've been able to apply that to my job. And then, my team has taught me how to, well, make sure I take care of myself. And not burn out and not pry out, and learn how to be a little more flexible with work schedules. And because, I'm Gen X and I work with a bunch of millennial women in the Austin office, and they have educated me, right? Like I came in when I first started running the Austin office, when it really kind of like had a good rhythm and stuff. I had everybody tracking their time, like with detail, like,
That
every
takes time
day.
in itself to do.
And then finally, somebody was brave enough to say, like, do we really need, do you need the information? And that's like, oh God, you know what? I don't, let's just get our job done. We're going to know if it's happening or not, and that's one of many examples. But
But it's so true and it's so
yeah.
relevant. And I think especially post-COVID, I don't know if I can say post-COVID, but that changed the way a lot of organizations work and operate. We went from being in person in a physical office, which we still have, but nearly half our team are remote now.
Yeah.
And that flexibility around, the working hours and the way that you work. Asynchronous working is a big thing for me. I've just had my third child, and being able to use tools like, FigJam or Loom videos, or, even Slack to some extent, like having those tools have really helped me work better, work smarter, rather than continue to work harder, right? You have to use your time really, really carefully. So how can you be more efficient with that?
Exactly. Yeah. And we focus on that a lot as a team, especially like at the front end of every year. We're just like, okay, what do we need to cut? Because, if it's not serving us, if there's no ROI, if it's not making you feel better as a human, it's going, And so being more efficient and really focusing on what works. And then I have to carve out my downtime, or I won't take it. And that's been a helpful tool for me as well.
So important for anyone listening. I know particularly in the tech for good sector, full stop, the word burnout, like this is a common challenge. And I think it is because everyone feels so invested for the causes that they're operating in and they're supporting. I think when you are fully invested on top of your day-to-day life, whether or not you're a parent, you're a friend, or you're doing other things, you're caring for, there's lots of things that you have to juggle in your day-to-day life. And I think it's understanding that your career, your work is a part of that. It's not all of it. And I think balancing that is a challenge. It's certainly been a challenge for me, and it sounds like it's been a challenge for you, Sarah.
It's hard, and it's hard as a founder too, you know? It's almost like your first child, or second, however it goes. But the thing is, like, I feel like, maybe I've done my daughter a disservice, but she's been part of my work since the beginning. You know, I would just take her in the little thing to all my meetings, and, you know, she's been on all, like, she's a shower strike every year, and you know, now it's getting to the point where she's really rejecting me, you know, as a little human. It's 'cause it's her age. It's cool. It's cool. I get it. But now I'm realizing, oh gosh, like these are two separate entities, you know. And I need to make sure I'm really mindful of where my work ends and she begins in a way that I wasn't forced to do before. And so I've learned from that as well.
And
And she doesn't love it. No, she doesn't love it anymore.
it's interesting because I can relate to that in that like work life, it's quite blended for me. And you know, and I think I personally had to do that to juggle being a mum to 3 and like working. Like that's a real challenge, but I understand the need for boundaries at the same time. And I think, you know, as the life stages evolve and, you know, you go as the kids get older, like
Yeah.
it becomes harder to blend. Like there isn't as much flexibility as maybe there once was. And people will find, you know, different solutions. I'm not there yet. I don't think I'll ever be there. I'm going to be continuously evolving, I think, as I go through it. But it is a real challenge.
It really, really is. And I work from home most of the time in a pretty small place, and we got kicked out of our office space. We were only going in once or twice a week, but the company we were renting from foreclosed. So now the whole well of our office is in my garage and flowing over into my other space, and there is no boundary. There's no visible boundary, and so it has to be a conscious choice. And I'm very sorry about this.
It's like, come on, the name of our extra guest, our special guest, Sarah.
The special guest is Peaches, and she's a psychotic cat.
Peaches looks rather comfortable on top of Sarah's chair for those that can't see us right now. But she's a welcome guest. We're a fan of Peaches.
Oh, she's a crazy cat. Yeah, sorry about that. But she's happy to be on. She appreciates the time today.
So, Sarah, it sounds like you're doing some amazing work, and obviously you're continuously improving, because it sounds like obviously you've got this next phase going through for the NGOs. I do have a question. The NGOs that are in your pipeline that you've had conversations with, are they a part of the design and development process for the next phase? Like, are you involving them in conversations of what might be helpful to them to take that into consideration?
Yes, and we already did. So because when we started getting people in our pipeline, our timeline, we thought we could still make it work, you know, and so but it allowed us to really hear like the pain points of all these other different types of organizations. And at the end of the day, what we decided to do was just make it easily modifiable so that we can kind of customize it to each organization's, you know, operations and water system types, because there's no standardization in our sector. And so we need to make it work across the board in multiple languages too. So yeah.
All the challenges thrown in there.
Yeah.
All the challenges.
Yeah. 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 So, and when we first start, and we've already identified our early beta partners, and when we start there, we'll be continuing to take feedback and modify and make it. We just want to make it as usable as possible, right? So that we can get more people on board using the app, so we can have more people taking care of this infrastructure. Because it's one thing to put trillions of dollars into, you know, a cause, but it's another thing. You know, once you know that only 40% of that trillion is doing anything, right? So what if we don't need more funding? What if we just need to make better use of what we have already? You see?
But like that stuff, honestly, it blows my mind, Sarah. Like I didn't realize it was as high as 40%. Like naturally I would be like, oh, maybe, you know, 2 to 5% maybe, but 40% is quite shocking.
It's unacceptable, right? And you don't know because you weren't told. So,
Like, I mean, it's like, and I know it's a difficult one, but why wouldn't you just go to funders and be like, hey, did you know this? Like,
we do. We do. And being able, getting the opportunity to educate a funder, it just makes my day. It's just getting in front of these funders is tricky, especially when, on the face of us, we're saying, oh, it's $30,000 to $40,000 for a water well. And they look at their second option and it's $5,000 without the opportunity to explain that.
I'm just, I can't, I can't get over that it's that high, and it's almost, it then makes you, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because then it makes you question everything else, like, and
I know
that's really, really hard when you're relying on donor dollars to fund projects.
Yeah. It goes back to the same issue of, like nonprofit staff and feeling like you can't really be very loud about it. And I have friends in these other organizations who aren't operating in the way that I feel like maybe they should. And so I don't want to shame them either. And it's not like they don't know, it's just like making that shift and telling hundreds of thousands of donors that what you were saying before isn't quite right, and we're going to pivot and we're going to do it this other way. I don't know.
I get like that. I mean, just, I don't have the solutions, but it's making me think a lot. And actually, when you were talking about the fact that when you get to educate donors, it makes your day, like that, I can see why, because that's what's going to achieve long-term change, not like a quick solution that isn't going to be long-term. Like no one, it's really hard because you don't want to be negative about a good initial solution, but equally someone needs to be flagging this stuff, because like it's not going to make the long-term sustainable change that we need.
No, it's debatably hurting our progress, because
it is. It's like it's taking donor dollars when actually they could be spent more efficiently and effectively elsewhere. And that's when you get into this, not rivalry, but the competitiveness between where the funding goes. And I know now more than ever, it is so hard to get funding, to get donor dollars, because there's so much noise, so many people asking. There's so many great causes, like trying to compete for a piece of that is so much harder now than it ever was previously.
There's so many nonprofits, and I think the vast majority of NGOs here in the U.S. Aren't really like regularly functional. So I think that that stat is a little bit not truthful, in as much as who's really out there working on this, but it's still too many, and we're not on the same page. And it stinks that we have to be competitive. It just really stinks.
So Sarah, talk to us about other examples of tech for good that you've come across that you want to shine a light on.
I'm really happy that I get this question, because I was honored to be a part of a Toyota Mothers of Invention program back in 2017. And it's just, they take a small cohort of women every year. Oh, they don't anymore. They shut down that, like every company, they're shutting down their CSRs. A small cohort of women every year who are doing some kind of like innovative social impact stuff. And I got to be one. And so I've met so many women doing really, really cool stuff with tech. Lab 4U, lab number 4, and then the letter U, is a friend of mine. She runs that company. It turns a cell phone into like a science lab for classrooms that can't afford a science lab. So cool. It's amazing stuff. There's another organization that I know about they started doing child placement work in India, but now they're focused on the US because we have quite the foster care problem. And so she's developed, it's also an app and a software that helps place these children with some other kind of family member. to get them in homes and not and out of orphanages and out of foster care. And then the software actually sort of tracks the progress and, keeps tabs on the parent and the child and kind of like creates a system to assure safety and health of the child through that. And it's Miracle Foundation is that one.
Oh my gosh, amazing. And I will be sure to check those out. And what we'll do is we will put links into the write-up and the description so that we can signpost to our listeners. But
Awesome.
Sarah, look, thank you so much for blowing my mind with some of those but also for educating me, for educating our listeners in terms of in this space. But if we wanted to, Sarah, like I know, obviously, I'm not in Africa. I don't have would I be able to take a look at the app? Like, is it out for the general public or is it closed down?
Well, yeah. So we're gonna to really have full visibility of the tool and the admin dashboard itself. We have to set up accounts for each user. But if you go to the app's website is wellbeyondwater.com. And there's like a little demo and like some features and kind of how it works. And then we also have a web version for like if we're doing like a demo and we're talking to a person who wants to be in our pipeline, then we can have like a login so people can kind of poke around and say, I can set you up if you want.
I would love that, Sarah. Okay. And I'm not just saying that, genuinely, I would love that. That would be amazing. And I'm just curious. So look, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I think we might need to check in once you've done phase 2, once the dashboard's done and complete. But look, thank you so much for your time, Sarah. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I love an opportunity to talk about this stuff. And I really appreciate you, Puff. Thank you.